we're excited to be here. I'm back again with Ned and Kelly Vandiver, and we're here to talk about what it means to really work on our marriage. There's a kind of an illusion around what that means. We hear this all the time. Individuals or couples who are working on their marriage will just be like, I'm working on it. I'm working on it. And there's sort of an intuitive understanding of what that actually means. But I think that there's some false notions about that we want to clear up today and talk about what it actually means to work on your marriage for real, like what it actually takes to transform your marriage and have the changes be lasting, as opposed to staying in that perpetual state of working on it. Because that's really not the outcome that we're looking for, is to stay working on it. There's specific outcomes that we want as a result. That's just the how, right? So I'm going to turn it over to you guys to start.
I see, for me, I see a lot of people who have this empty, for guys a lot of times anyway, this aspect of having this empty apology, and are talking to their wives because they just feel like, we guys just kind of feel like we're supposed to apologize because our wives on a number of occasions feel a certain way, and we're just constantly going, yeah, I'm sorry, babe. I won't do that anymore. Whatever it is, but we're never addressing the whole issue. Like, if I say the apology, this is me working on dealing with this issue, right? So part of that is, as long as I apologize, maybe she'll feel better, right? But it never resolves the core issue and the problem, and you never talk about it. And a lot of times, the other aspect of that is that a lot of times the women are in a place where after a certain point, it depends, a lot of this is modeled for them in their childhood. And this is based on an old kind of relational paradigm, that women are pretty quiet about even bringing up issues a lot of times. And they won't even speak to a lot of the problems that they're having, but they begin to act out in ways that show that they're angry, but it's not dealing with the core. It's always some small thing that's trivial that has become, they're making it about that, but they're not really addressing the core problem, right? And so guys find themselves trying to really understand, why are you so upset about this? I didn't put the lid down on, whatever it is. It's not dealing with the core issue, which is a huge part of the problem.
Yeah.
So that's one big thing that I see when I identify.
I was just gonna say, our culture, I mean, just throughout, like, just Hollywood and just our culture in general, it's like, guys are just supposed to apologize, right? When their wives are pissed off, I'm going to apologize because she's pissed off. Because that's what a guy does. They apologize, right? But the problem is they don't even know what they're apologizing for. You know what I mean? That they're just apologizing. It's like, where are we getting here? Like, why are you apologizing? And so nothing ever gets resolved, like you said.
Well, it's like confusing. I think the idea is that if I'm willing to avoid conflict, then that means I'm working on the marriage.
Right.
If I just don't say anything at all and I keep the peace and I really set my intention to, don't rock the boat.
Right.
Just keep the peace, then that means that I'm working on the marriage. But actually, that's the opposite of working on the marriage, because you're really just in avoidance.
Right.
I think also a lot of people believe that having insight and understanding, like, why something is happening, why they're reacting the way they're reacting, or why their spouse might be reacting that way, that is the equivalent of working on it because they have an understanding. And I totally get that, because that's like half the battle, is to first understand something, to have insight, to self-reflect, to go, oh, I see why this is happening. But I think where people go wrong is they feel like that's enough. They think that if they understand it and they have the insight, that now intellectually they get it and they should be able to just not do that anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And that awareness alone is not enough to actually, like, put it into action.
Right. Yeah. And that's a huge part for me from my understanding, especially when Kelly and I started doing this work. I didn't realize how difficult it was to actually put this into action. I didn't, like you said, it's one thing to know what you're doing wrong and to understand that, but it's another thing to address the core part, which we get into, is, the beliefs and the depth of the beliefs and how they keep you rooted in this dysfunction, and it's really how to address that aspect of your psyche, that part of your psyche, so you can start creating new beliefs and creating new pathways to create new habits,
Yeah.
you know?
Right, right, exactly. And that brings me to the next thing, which is that I think there's this idea that, well, if I learn the tools, if I learn the communication tools, if I watch the trainings, if I read the blog, if I read the books and I understand these concepts and I have these tools in my arsenal,
Yeah.
that I'll be able to, or even going to counseling once a week,
Right.
that will be enough to translate into a completely new lived experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's almost, I think, worse to think, okay, with the tools and with my insight, I'm working on it, than it would be to not even be working on it at all, because then you're not aware of the danger of where you could be missing the boat. You know what I'm saying? It's almost like when something is unconscious, it has more power over you.
Mm.
And it has to be, it's only when it's brought to the light that you can address it and say, now I'm not going to let this run me anymore. And
Right.
there's this like feeling of like, oh, I'm working on it. I'm not going to be caught unaware because I already have the tools. But the triggers are going to get in the way. The physiological reactions, those old default programs, the perceptual filter that we have that's unconscious, all of that stuff is going to get in the way. So no matter how many tools you have, or no matter how much insight you have, when you get triggered and you go, into fight or flight mode or something, if you have a trauma response, then all of that is not available to you.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And then people get in these situations where, because they're not talking, and both there are men and women who don't talk about this stuff, who dabble, and then they find themselves in a situation where their partner all of a sudden one day wants to leave. They want a divorce, they want out. And the other partner is like blindsided because they're like, I thought everything was fine,
And
and
they're surprised.
and they're totally surprised and caught off guard.
Right.
And it happens a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
One thing that I notice is we a lot of people make this mistake of expressing the intention to the promise to do better. That becomes
Yes.
a habit of within the dynamic too. Is just I'm gonna get to that, or I'm just gonna I'm gonna call someone and we're gonna I'm gonna get someone to help us and talk about that, and that becomes a huge discouraging dance within the dynamic also, because that leads nowhere either, because it continues to be the same thing day in and day out, week on, week out. Nothing ever changes. And this also really gets into the aspect of when you're talking about people actually thinking that they can read books and do these things, and they actually start trying to do things themselves, right? And they want their partner. This is one of the answers to that too, is like, are you going to read this book? Or are you going to video, or and that kind of thing. It's just like, but the other that's a double-edged sword, because first of all, you're trying to do things and implement things that you don't properly know how to do, right? And you're trying to get your partner, so that can be very dangerous also. But the other part of that is it might be better that they not join you if you don't know what you're doing either, so because
and plus you're focusing on them. Like I've done this before too, where I read a book and then I want to tell my husband how this applies to him,
exactly, yeah.
And we do this, right? Spouses will be like, oh, I read this and I'm understanding the concepts. I see exactly how this applies to my spouse, but then they're outward focused. And that's really not what creates lasting change in the relationship. Is it really has to be from the inside out and looking at yourself first, no matter what you see is going on, right? Like that's relevant. But until you can change your own stuff on the inside, none of that insight will actually translate long-term. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's the thing. And what you were saying, Ned, the promise to do better and just being on good behavior for a couple of weeks.
Exactly.
But then eventually people backslide. And I hear this over and over again. People backslide. Things are good for a little while, but if you don't get to the root, eventually when people get stressed or tired or under-resourced, those old default ways are going to take them right back.
Yeah.
So with that, I mean, how do we articulate really what it is that working on a marriage really means? If we're going to, redefine this and really talk about, I mean, I almost want to use a different phrase for this, but to share with you guys what we believe really what the work means It's not what we just did, not what we just shared. That's the start. Like, that's a great start. I'm not poo-pooing any of that.
Yeah.
That's where most people get the wheels turning, right? And they wake up a little bit, but then to actually translate that into a different lived experience, there's a whole other set of things that has to happen. So do you guys want to start with that and share?
So, what I wrote down in my notes was that, everything that we've shared, so far on this talk is, like you said, just the beginning, like the surface level stuff, also known as dabbling, right? You're just like dipping your toes in the water. But again, a lot of people think that that's how you work on the relationship. That's how you work on the marriage. When really the work is like laser focus, like tunnel vision, very on learning a really particular sophisticated skill set, and learning the tools of being relational and focusing on that and making it part of your lifestyle, and living these things day in and day out.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we have people who, we work with, and then people that you've worked with and in the program who they've invested the money, right? Like, they've invested in doing this work, and they still aren't doing the work, because the work it's minute to minute, it's day by day, it's all the time.
Yeah.
And do
Yep.
you want to go into what the skills and the tools are that we teach?
Yeah, I think that would be great. But I wanted to just kind of do an overview too, first of, because that gets into the how do we bring that into our new way? But I want to just highlight this idea that in order to up level anything, there has to be some kind of systematic daily action. It's
Right.
not something that can be compartmentalized. So the first thing that I think that we have to remember, the work is in one, if you are in a marriage or a relationship that is really struggling and you want to turn it around, it can't be relegated to a once a week type of thing. It really has to be something that you're willing to say, I'm going to go into a systematic daily action, whatever that is for you. And we're going to get into that. But first, you have to have the willingness. And what I recommend, what I think the order should be, is that you first, because it can't really just be like hodgepodge. It can't be like compartmentalized. It can't just be, whatever you think of at the time. Let's try this one out, like haphazard application of tools. First, there has to be like an order. And then there's, of course, skills for each thing. But what I recommend is first you have to do the inner work. You have to look inward, clear out the barriers internally, like what Ned, you were saying, is that to do the belief work. Whatever
Right.
those old programs are where you feel like you're playing out into your marriage, childhood trauma, past relationships, limiting beliefs are part of that. So you have to change those limiting beliefs. Then you have to get you have to have a strong vision and a clear understanding of like, what's my goal? What is my life dream? What does my relationship look like within that? And like you said, Kelly, just having a laser focus on that. This is where I'm going. This is what I'm going to create.
Yeah.
And with that said, I want to also highlight this idea that to work on a marriage is not to go back into the broken parts of it. It's really to step out of it completely and build something new. And because
Exactly.
and to build it through our attention, take our attention off the problems, focus on the vision 95% of the time. What am I creating? Where am I going? Who do I need to be to have that? That's a really big part of it. It's not just about reacting to what's happening in the moment and fixing the problem in the moment, which is really a symptom of something deeper.
Yeah.
You have to lead with that vision. And then you can go into consciously expanding the number of positive interactions, which is very much a part of that creation of what you want,
Exactly.
instead of going right into the problem, which is what traditional couples counseling does, is go right to the problem and stay in the world of the problem. But really expanding the positive interactions, then building an emotional connection so you feel safe, so that you feel heard, your partner feels heard. Then from that place, you can focus on the tools of communication.
Right. which is the
that
last
all
thing.
of that has to, yeah, right. But we like, it's a flip around what people normally think of, right?
Yeah, yeah, totally. And like you said, just and it's a whole it's a skill just to know how to shift your focus from just always looking at what the person is doing wrong in your eyes into, okay, what are all the things they do right? Right? It's just like
Mm-hmm.
that's a skill in
Mm-hmm.
itself to be able
Yes.
to shift the focus. Because the problem is most people are focused on all the wrong, all the bad stuff, all the wrong stuff.
Yeah, but the first thing that you mentioned, and
Mm-hmm.
this is the important part, because if we're talking about building a foundation that's going to support the other levels of your structure, okay? Because it's kind of like having a blueprint, right? You do have
Yeah.
that solid foundation first, and then you build upon that. The belief work is probably one of the most important things, because this is actually where whatever you create around the belief work is what is going to become the foundation to support everything else going forward. And if your
Yes.
belief work structure is not very strong, it's going to feel very wobbly as you
Right.
try to advance yourself through the work, the modules, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
the strength of what you build going forward is based on your ability to really create very strong beliefs around what it is you want to create, because that is how you really start to support strongly your vision. You have
Yes.
to have really strong beliefs. Okay.
Yes, you cannot bypass that. People
No.
want to bypass that
That,
because it changes. You have to be willing to change the way that you think about something. You
exactly.
have to be owning the meaning that you're giving something. And you have to be willing to say, like, maybe I could give it a different meaning. And
Right.
that's where a lot of resistance comes up. People don't want to give up the meanings that they give something that are automatic, even if it doesn't serve them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that's a
mean,
hard one.
And it's really easy to want to bypass that. I also like what you're saying is that part of the work, really working on it, is the willingness to be very uncomfortable. That's one of the things I wrote down too. It's a commitment to being uncomfortable for extended periods of time and being willing to feel out of your depth, to
Yeah.
feel like, oh, I'm not doing it right, to feel like it's messy and I tried it, I understood it, I did it, but now I'm going back to this again, and now I have to remind myself in repetition. And I think people get hard on themselves and they think they must be doing it wrong if it feels that way.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that's inherently part of leveling up. There's
And
no way you can level up anything in your life if you're not willing to be uncomfortable, because those old programs are going to try to keep you where you are.
right.
There's no way to make anything better than where you are unless you can get comfortable with feeling uncomfortable. So I think there's got to be a willingness to do that. And yeah, and to know, to really reframe that and to know this is actually what is supposed to be happening. This is how it's supposed to feel. That means I'm moving in the right direction.
Right.
But instead, people tend to think, oh, I must be doing it wrong. This isn't meant to be, or I can't do this. Right. And then they throw in the towel.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really good point.
That part of the brain, that reptilian part of the brain, is just so comfortable where it is. It wants us to stay right there in the default programming. And so that's why it's so uncomfortable, is because it's literally a part of us. Like, it's literally a part of who we are.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
we have to learn how to use, and that's another one of the skills, like second consciousness, using the prefrontal cortex. It's another part of what we teach, is that's the part of ourselves, that's the part of our brain that has control. We can use that part of our mind to purposefully, with intention, reprogram that reptilian brain that's so habituated.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and you know, meditation is another one of the things that you know, we
Yeah, that
recommend.
was what I was going to ask, is so what are some of the tools that people can use to do this?
Yeah.
Assuming that if you guys are willing to be uncomfortable, you're willing to understand that it starts with you and you want to really look at yourself first before focusing on your spouse, no matter what they have going on. Like, you could be right about your spouse, but you won't have any leverage until you clean up your side and remove your own dysfunction from the mix so that they can see themselves clearly. And then you can invite them into the new foundation that you're building. That's really how I look at it. Once you've, made peace with this and you're willing to do the belief work and the deep work, share a little bit about what it is that we recommend, because there's different things for different people, obviously. When our belief training that we did, it was, for different approaches are going to work for different people. So what are some of the things that you guys teach?
Well, there's different forms of meditation. Some people like to be out in nature. Being in nature is a form of meditation, but specifically meditation around breathing, breath work. And there are guided meditations, there are theta wave meditations, and all the different brainwave meditation, binaural beats. There are many, many different kinds of meditation. And self-hypnosis is another form of meditation that we highly recommend. And again, these are the skills and the tools that you need, period, to start to focus in on and hone in and figure out which modality works best for you, in terms of meditation. The inner child work is super important. That's something else that we go through, I know, in the program and when we work with people. The inner child work is really to figure out, okay, what happened to me, becoming really self-aware around what's going on inside of you, instead of projecting it onto your partner. Okay, why am I so triggered? And then learning how to self-partner with yourself and be like that parent that you never had growing up, and just partnering alongside that little person that's always going to be inside of you. And
guiding them and getting control of them and keeping them safe and contained, as opposed to letting them run the show.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Second consciousness work, I just mentioned that a few minutes ago. It's really about, second consciousness is about, and it's what Dr. Terry Real calls the proto skill before all other skills. Second consciousness is like the most foundational, important piece of learning. It's about how to go from first consciousness, which is that default mode that we all have, that setting, and to be able to take yourself from that mode of thinking and operation and being, and taking yourself off of that track and literally putting yourself on track B and coming from a mature, wise, centered, grounded place. Where you're calm, cool, and collected. And that's second consciousness. So it's because you want to be learning from that place, you want to be speaking from that place, you want to be doing everything you can from that place, not the default mode. And they say 95% of our actions and just our daily life of living is already predetermined, 95%.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary to me. I want to be 100% intentional about all of it, but I mean, that's just not the case.
Yeah.
So second consciousness is huge. The belief work, which we went over in some detail, the identity work, the identity piece, to me,
it's important. To me
is, I don't know what you feel like the identity work is, but for me, the identity work is really about, it's part of the belief work. It's part of your vision work. But it's to me, it's about integrity. To me, the identity is about integrity. Is who I'm being right now in the present moment in integrity with my vision of who I'm becoming? And if it's not, then that's something that I need to not do, not say, not be. What do you?
I agree with you, but I feel like also the sequence in which you're going through this would be after you've done some work on yourself, because when we're talking about once you get to a point where you can recognize who you are, because we're talking about the vision, and the vision alone is difficult enough to create for yourself in terms of how is this going to look? How am I going to look in relationship with my partner when I've had years of dysfunction and looking this way, right? So it's just hard enough to say, I want to get along with my partner, right? Now, who do I look like when I'm doing that? That identity has to develop over time, because the vision of yourself, just removing yourself from dysfunction into a totally functional adult, happy person dealing with your spouse on a daily basis, is a stretch for a lot of people. So for me, the identity is that takes some time to develop, and it takes the practice of belief work, the inner child work, are very important to creating that new character and that new identity. Because if you don't know what you've done to shoot yourself in the foot, if you don't recognize the parts of yourself that are showing up dysfunctionally, that little child aspect of yourself, that little child part of yourself, if you've never identified that part of yourself, you don't even know what you look like as a functional adult. You just always have been living from the child state, right?
Yeah.
So, yes, I feel like the identity work is huge, but I feel like by the time you get to that part, you've done a great deal of things to create that character. But once you get rooted in that, it's a very important part to keeping the support and maintaining that seamlessness in terms of the dynamic that you want to create in the first place.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. And I also think, because I agree that it takes a long time in that sense. And it takes a while to fully embody that new identity that would support the relationship that you want.
Yeah.
But I also think it's great to start there too, because when you create your relationship vision and you're thinking about, well, what do I want to have? It's very much connected. Like, who we are is going to dictate what we have, right? So we have to become that person who can not only create what we want, but sustain it long term. And so you have to be the person that can have what it is that you want to have. So a lot of times we want something. At least this is how it was for me. When I started to up-level my relationship, I realized, like, I wanted my husband to change all these things, and they did need to be changed. However, I was not showing up as the person that would actually support that, attract that, or maintain that.
Exactly.
And so it was only in realizing this is not my best self. I need to figure out who I want to be so that I can have what I want to have. And then we'll see what's possible truly, and what's mine and what's not mine. And it's a good exercise in boundary work too. If you think in terms of who do I want to be to support the relationship I want to have.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I've been at fault in doing is unbridled self-expression, which is a huge losing strategy. So actually having a boundary and knowing how to contain myself in those moments where I do want to explode is definitely how I identify with the character of who I want to show up and be in those moments.
It's also really empowering, right? If you're leading with your identity, then you're not thinking, oh, I can't do or say that because my spouse will get mad at me. It's more like, I can't do or say that because that's not who I am. That's not who I choose to be. It's just much more powerful.
It is. It is.
But all of these are the things that you have to learn. The subconscious mind reprogramming work, which all of this that we're talking about is subconscious mind reprogramming work. And then once you really dive deep and you get into yourself and you start doing that inner inside out work, then like you said, Monika, the last part is learning the relational tools. Like that's the stuff we'll want to dive into first. But it's like, if you don't have the foundation, like you were talking about earlier, to support all these skills and tools, you're not in the identity of a person who's going to be able to use those tools. Because it's like, Terry says that RLT is like, it's not normal, typical counseling, because, other programs and other therapy teaches you skills and tools. We deal with the part of you that doesn't give one single crap about using those skills or tools.
Right.
And
because that part will sabotage you every single time if you don't deal with it.
So you have to be the person first who can use these skills and tools. And when you have the identity of a person and the beliefs of a person who uses these things well, you're at your vision. You are the healthiest, happiest version of yourself. But you have to have the foundation first.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to mention too is that if you guys try these things and you go through this and you find that you need support, then just let yourself get the mentorship, whether it's with us, whether it's with someone else. These are the things that we would recommend. These are the steps that I would recommend, and not just once a week, but building it into your day-to-day life, having that be front and center rather than dragging it out. I think when you're in crisis, trying to drag something out for like a year to turn around a marriage, it's giving yourself too much time in between to backslide, as opposed to getting a huge amount of traction, front load all the support in a shorter period of time. Couples can turn things around within 4 months. People can turn an entire 26-year marriage with deeply entrenched dynamics around if they make that the priority, just like you would make getting an education or a professional certificate or
healing yourself from disease. I mean, seriously.
Yes. Like if you're on a health protocol or something, it's all consuming, right? I believe it has to be immersive. I believe it has to be all consuming. If you are in crisis. Now, if your relationship's great and you just want to improve it and you want to learn a few more things, then I wouldn't say that has to be the case. But if it's sort of like, gosh, if we don't turn this around, it's going to fall apart, then I would recommend getting mentorship. Just like I think anytime anybody's trying to master a skill set, we seek out classes, we seek out a teacher, we figure out how to get that support, that somebody can coach you and from the sidelines be able to course correct you to anticipate and to see what's ahead that you might not see. Because if you're in the painting, you can't really see the painting.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's a really good point.
It's so important.
That's a really good point, Monika.
It's just so different.
Yeah. So many people don't recognize, and I'm glad you just brought up the aspect of how do we create success in our lives, right? Normally we do, right? We go after teachers. People talk about Tony Robbins, and we're talking about personal development. They're these big time personal development gurus. Everybody knows, right?
Yeah.
And anytime there's any aspect of a person's life, for the most part, that they want to improve, they usually seek help.
Yeah.
But I don't see too many people doing that when it comes to, I see so many people trying to handle relationship problems in their marriage by themselves.
Yeah.
And a lot of it stems from, there's some embarrassment. Because, a lot of people think, they're the only ones having problems in their relationship. And that's not the case. Most people are having issues in their relationship.
Most.
And I want people who are listening to really understand that, because if you've been hesitant about getting the help that you need, that could possibly change your life and your dynamic in your relationship, you really need to take that first step, because what Monika shared today is really important and pivotal to changing your life, your marriage, because that is also if you have children, this affects your children too. So I want people to really get out of their own way and really take charge of their life by taking this first step and choosing to get the help that they need and that they say they want to change in their life. Go ahead and take the first step.
It's not, there's nothing wrong with that, because the truth is that we were not taught this stuff. This is not something that is taught anywhere unless you actively seek it out.
Exactly.
And I think, like you say, there's a shame aspect. And I think just socially, the paradigm, we would, I see people spend a lot of time and energy planning a wedding. How much time they spend picking everything out. It's like a full-time job, like a part-time to full-time job for
a year too. Yeah.
People spend a lot of time on that. But then once they're married, they don't want to actually put the time in. And I think there's something about relationships where we expect a lot from our relationship. We expect our primary relationship to be the foundation for everything that we care about in life. We want it to nourish us. We want it to give us the energy and the sense of love and safety and fun and pleasure and all of these things that we want from our relationship, without really putting that much into it.
Exactly.
Because I think we just weren't taught that that's how it works. I think people are just thinking that that's
Yeah.
just supposed to happen automatically once you're married and you've made that commitment. The
Right.
rest should just like follow. But
Yeah.
it's actually, the more that I've done this work with couples and in my own life, it's a miracle to me when people stay together for a really long time. Like it's really, it's like hard, and it takes a lot of skill if you want to have a healthy relationship. Like I
Exactly.
think that's what we're talking about. I mean, some
Yeah.
people can stay together for 60 years, come hell or high water, and it's not healthy. That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
We're talking
Exactly.
about really creating a healthy, joyful relationship and being willing to put the time in it. Cause I hear people all the time, I don't have the time. I'm too busy remodeling my kitchen, or I'm too busy, working on this other project.
Yeah.
But none of that is going to matter if your marriage falls apart. So I think people get it backwards, not through any fault of their own, but I think it's a blind spot, a cultural
Right.
blind spot.
Yeah.
And the the money aspect for people, the time, the money, the energy. And it's like, culturally we've been taught that all the things are so much more important. The expensive vacations. I mean, people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on their education. Why? Right. So it's like intimacy, marriage, connection, those things have not been put at the forefront or at the top of the list of what is important in life.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
our relationships, how we are able to connect and relate with another human being. I mean, that's like the most important thing if you ask me. And so it's really about changing your whole mindset and value system and beliefs around, okay, what do I hold most dear? I say that this relationship is important to me. Am I willing to like give it everything that I've got?
Yeah.
And if you're
Yeah.
not, you kind of want to look at that too.
Yeah, I totally agree. 100%. Yeah. I mean, nothing else matters. Like if I think about all the things that I care about, that I want to have in my life or create in my life or enjoy in my life, would mean really nothing to me. I mean, it wouldn't be nothing, but it would be not as meaningful. It would be really sad if I wasn't able to share that with my husband, And I think when we pick somebody to spend our life with, there's a reason why, because we
Right.
really love that person. We really want to heal with that person or through that person. And that's possible. And I think once you get it, it's so, I think, and we're focusing on the work, right? But what I want to really anchor in right now is that it's worth it, because it doesn't stay laborious and tedious the whole
No.
time. It's
No.
not like that forever. It
No.
just is in the beginning when you're trying to turn the tides. It takes an enormous amount of energy. But once you get it embodied and you get it dialed in, and it becomes your new muscle memory and your new like
It's not hard.
baseline,
Yeah.
it's so worth it. And nobody ever regrets that. Nobody regrets it.
Well, and you said,
Nobody.
and you said something very powerful too, just a few minutes ago, where you said, we've seen this transformation take place in 2 to 3 months, 4 months, of people who've been married for 60 years and have been miserable, and we've seen this change, this dynamic change in that short period of time. So it's well worth it, right? That goes without saying. But like you said, the most important thing here is what starts out as feeling very challenging and hard becomes a labor of love. You understand what I'm saying? Because you start, this becomes your identity and your life, and you start understanding that you have control over your happiness with your person.
Yeah.
And that part that makes you feel so good is just like, I've taken back control over my happiness in my life with my person.
Yeah.
I'm no longer controlled by these exterior forces anymore. I can create what I want with my, I get to create this again.
Yeah. There's nothing better than that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amen.
Yeah. It's powerful.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah. Well, you guys, thank you so much. I always love having these conversations with you, and hopefully you guys enjoyed it too. I'm wondering if do we have any other questions? If anybody has any questions, go ahead and put them in the comments below. And if you guys are watching this later, oh, I see where the comments are. If you guys have comments later, if you're not watching this live and you're watching the replay, we'll still answer the questions.
Yeah.
You can tag us, or we'll just see it. It'll probably be faster if you tag us. And we will take it from there, because I know not everybody was able to be live, but hopefully this was helpful for you guys. And we will be back next month. We're going to be back on the first Tuesday of November, which is going to be November 2nd. I'm not sure what the topic will be, but we will let you guys know.
Yes.
All right.
All
Well,
right,
thank
you guys. Thanks for joining, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.